Trump is lashing out again. He's ordered the Federal Reserve Chairman to cut interest rates immediately, or he'll fire Powell. Interest rate cuts are supposed to help the market, but the stock market took a serious hit that day. Some people have warned, don't touch stocks, don't buy homes. But have you considered this? If even the Federal Reserve doesn't know whether it can maintain its independence, shouldn't we ordinary people rethink how we manage our money? Is it time to change our investment strategy from the past? Why did the stock market plunge when interest rate cuts were announced? Someone put it very sharply. From an investor's perspective, this is no longer about saving the market from an economic standpoint, but shows the shadow of a planned economy. If investors are beginning to doubt that the Federal Reserve is gradually losing its decision-making authority, market confidence will be shaken. This perspective is interesting. Have you noticed how our investment decisions have changed? In the past, when buying stocks, funds, or real estate, we considered budgets, how interest rates would affect us, and cash returns. But now, don't you feel like every statement from the president, every action he takes, needs to be carefully weighed? If interest rate cuts are meant to prop up the market, and the stock market is being pushed up by uncontrolled power, then no doubt, only the top 1% of wealthy people will truly profit. If they can influence the Federal Reserve, they can certainly learn about power shifts in places we can't see, allowing them to profit accordingly. Meanwhile, ordinary people are left just reading news headlines. We may not have done anything wrong, but in reality, power is quietly changing the trajectory of your wealth and mine. In fact, these changes are already underway. A director made a film years ago with a classic line that left many investors speechless. In this world, there's really only one disease, poverty. On the surface, this poverty disease in the movie meant lacking money. But in our real lives, especially in investment environments, it refers to something much deeper than material poverty. I'm not making value judgments, just objectively describing a mindset that lacks adaptability when it comes to investments and financial management. People like this are everywhere around us. They're not necessarily completely broke, but they never think about or dare try financial management. Some might even be our own family members. Not all people are like this, of course, but a significant portion of retired friends never invest in stocks, don't care about bonds or investments, and never calculate maintenance costs when buying property. They only care about interest in their retirement accounts, which seems reassuring. But recently, they frequently mention egg price increases, oil price increases, and even how their favorite chili sauce increased by 10 to 20 cents. These people see the details clearly, but wouldn't discuss spending habits with their children before. Now the situation has completely reversed. Their shopping philosophy has made a 180-degree turn from previous habits. As someone claimed, if I don't spend money buying it today, it will only be more expensive tomorrow morning. With 5% CD interest rates versus 3.4% inflation, and rising utilities and insurance costs, the actual purchasing power remaining is minimal. Without spending a penny, don't you feel your money is becoming less valuable? This is why the Federal Reserve needs to maintain its independent decision-making, because it can't be influenced by political power to casually modify economic policies. Once decision-making becomes uncontrolled and inflation runs wild, those who will suffer most are the cautious, risk-averse people who live carefully structured lives. We can boldly hypothesize. If the Federal Reserve truly loses its independence, whose assets would face the biggest impact immediately? It's not inflation making you poorer. It's still using unchanged thinking to fight against a world that may have already changed. Risk control strategies. Many people think risk control means accurately predicting the future. It's not. Risk control means preparing a suitable exit strategy for yourself in advance. You need to consider the most extreme market scenarios that might occur and what kind of impact you might face, then figure out how to reduce that impact. Let's assume Trump really does strip the Federal Reserve of its decision-making independence. Which groups would face the biggest impact immediately? Remember, the following discussion isn't about macroeconomic narratives. It's about friends and family around us, including ourselves. Group 1. Retirees dependent on interest income. The first category includes stable people relying on interests in savings account for retirement. I often overhear conversations. I never buy stocks. My house is paid off. I rely on savings and CD accounts. I'm completely disconnected from financial markets. How can you affect me now? But notice, once the Federal Reserve collapses and political power starts interfering with interest rates, inflation might spiral out of control. The group hit hardest would be these friends. Their money becomes tighter to spend, and eventually they may not dare spend at all. Group 2. Young families ready to buy homes. The second category includes young families preparing to buy homes, especially those with children. Many couples with good incomes might have been waiting for interest rate cuts last year while saving money, but the cuts never came. Now they've finally saved enough for a down payment. If the Federal Reserve could maintain stable interest rates, that would be fine, but now it might become unpredictable like tariffs, changing constantly. These families can't make decisions about buying homes or selecting good school districts. They watch interest rates fluctuating, see housing prices fluctuating, and feel stuck. Young families without substantial savings have very short investment decision windows. They won't have the patience to wait 5 years, maybe 2 years max. When their rental lease expires and children need to start school, forcing parents to choose districts, if they discover they haven't secured a good school district or entered the market, they might be pushed into buying anyway. Group 3. Middle-aged asset holders with limited liquidity. The third category includes middle-aged people with assets that are difficult to liquidate. For example, I met a guy who is in his 40s, in his prime earning years, and owned an old house near Irvine and was considering buying a new one. His biggest problem wasn't whether housing prices would rise, it was complete market confusion. He wanted to sell his current house, but felt he couldn't get the high price he expected. He didn't dare convert it to an investment property because inflation and tariffs had made renovation costs prohibitively expensive after getting several quotes, so his house is an asset that has appreciated but doesn't bring any liquid returns. It's essentially frozen. He doesn't dare sell it, doesn't dare buy, and doesn't dare renovate. That's the real estate predicament he faces. So looking at these 3 generations, elderly, middle-aged, and young, if the Federal Reserve is dismantled and the interest rate market becomes purely a power game, those truly trapped won't be the top 1% wealthy, nor investors, nor large institutions. If you belong to one of these 3 categories, let's continue with categorized advice on how to protect yourself and make timely decisions that benefit you most. Practical protection strategies, I often see statements like, I'm betting on this or I'm certain about that. The more unstable the market, the more dangerous it is to put all your eggs in one basket. Many seemingly simple, conservative old methods might actually help you endure longer in these turbulent market conditions. If you endure, you win. For the 3 categories of people we discussed, here are different coping principles. Remember, stay calm, don't panic. For retirees dependent on interests from their savings first, for those relying on interest and retirement savings, my advice is to prioritize stability in your cash flow. For retirement funds, CD yields, and fixed interest income, combine them all and calculate a total. Establish something like an emergency fund. For example, use a 6-month time frame. Calculate the money needed for expenses over the next 6, 9, or 12 months, and review this combination every 6 months. Simultaneously, reduce non-essential large impulse purchases. Emotional spending isn't just for young people. Many retirees have some extra money and buy things freely, but these small purchases add up. In the current market environment, switch to a slightly more conservative consumption strategy. The core goal is defense, not appreciation or indulgent spending. For those watching the housing market, especially young people planning to start families and have children this year, I suggest that if your family is definitely expanding and buying a house is necessary, the most important thing this year or next is to prioritize your monthly payment burden. This is your reference point for decision making based on your own affordability when buying a house. First, calculate your budget as a couple. If you're using 2026 as your decision reference period, you can clearly calculate the costs of maintaining a house over the next 2 years. If your budget can cover all these expenses, that's great. You have the financial strength. If you find that the costs over these 2 years, including monthly mortgage payments, would be very difficult to manage, consider looking at developer promotions and discounts that we discussed in our former episode. Sometimes, developers need to clear inventory for their next quarterly financial report to tell a good story to the stock market. They might need to quickly clear properties, offering discounts to drive sales volume, boosting their stock price. They might be willing to take some losses, look at new construction opportunities. Finally, for those with old houses who are stuck, people in their prime years who want to increase their assets. If you already feel you can't sell, or if you do sell, you feel shortchanged, first consider what goals you have for this house over the next 3 to 5 years. Is your primary goal to exchange it for another house, invest, or prepare it for your children? Different goals naturally lead to different approaches. If you're investing but feel selling now would result in a loss, could renovation be another investment approach? Consider simple renovation methods that give the best return on investment. If you're determined to sell, perhaps to exchange houses or need the money, you might need to shift from your psychological price to the market price. This isn't being beaten by the market, but educated by it. The most real price is the market feedback, while your previous pricing was imagined and may no longer fit the market. If you're determined to sell to achieve liquidity and more freedom in buying another house, this era isn't about fearing slow moves, but fearing repetitive back and forth. If your house has been listed for 6 months without selling, then delisted and relisted, you've neither received cash nor improved your situation. Worse, the property's listing history gets recorded on websites, and future buyers seeing these records will immediately question what's wrong with the house. This repeated listing and delisting can be very unfavorable for your future valuation. Finally, I'd love to hear your insights. Let's imagine if the Federal Reserve really does, as President Trump suggests, fire the Federal Reserve Chairman and lose its independent decision-making authority. How would you arrange your future life and investments? Would you still consider buying property? I hope to see your thoughts in the comments. There are many complainers, but not as many thinking about solutions. So I wanted to discuss this topic from a risk control perspective. What different people should do. The various market possibilities aren't just about expressing emotions, but thinking about which category you belong to and analyzing specific situations. As we just discussed, you need to make decisions based on your specific circumstances. Finally, thank you very much for your likes and subscriptions. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss our next exciting update.